Imagine living your life after 50 and feeling energized and excited about your future. Welcome to the Women in the Middle podcast, the podcast for women who are ready to figure out what they want and create the life they deserve. Here's your host and master certified life coach, Susie Rosenstein.
Hey there, today's episode is all about 5 steps to create a comeback for your midlife health with Holly Bertone. Let's go. Welcome back to the podcast Women in the Middle with over 1 million downloads and counting. I'm your host, Susie Rosenstein, your master certified coach and midlife clarity expert, and I am so happy to be here with you again. So if you are like so many other midlife gals, you may be thinking about your health a little more often than you did a few decades ago. And you may be a bit bewildered on occasion too, with, menopause and getting older and all the things. My guest on today's show has an inspiring story and a really useful perspective to help you keep growing and come back to a healthier you. But just quick, before we have fun taking a deep dive into this whole topic, I am really excited to invite you to download something that I made for you that's free and also fun to think about. It's your copy of Top 10 Tips to Reimagine Your Life After 50. It is super useful when you're looking for some journal prompts to start thinking about who you are, what you want, and what is really possible. If you're interested, head over to www.susierosenstein.com/10 questions. And that's the number 10. 10 questions. Okay, now here we go. As I mentioned, today's episode is all about 5 steps to create a comeback for your midlife health with Holly Bertone. Holly Bertone is a certified holistic health coach, motivational speaker, #1 Amazon best-selling author, and host of Your Comeback Story podcast. Holly's expertise is as a midlife comeback coach for professional women over 40 to help them recover from burnout by ditching the habits and beliefs holding them back so they can have consistent and sustainable energy, weight loss, and vitality without crazy diets, restrictive protocols, and hours in the gym. Holly spent 20 years in consulting and federal government service, primarily at the FBI, where she was a chief of staff. After her own experience of breast cancer, healing herself from an autoimmune disease, and creating a no-conflict divorce, she combines the principles of performance and mindset to coach successful women who are burned out to unleash their comeback story for their health, lives, and careers. And just a quick reminder, the information shared in this podcast is intended for your convenience, entertainment, and education, and isn't geared to your personal situation. It's not a replacement for care or advice from your own medical professional. So as always, you may have some things you want to follow up on, so please seek a suitable professional to advise you on your personal situation. I know you're going to get a lot out of hearing this interview, so please enjoy. Hi, Holly. Thanks so much for joining me today on the Women in the Middle podcast.
Susie, thanks so much for having me, and I'm excited to be here.
I am so excited you're here too. Every once in a while you meet somebody with an abnormal amount of stuff in common with you, and that's totally what happened when I met you in a podcaster's Facebook group. So I started to stalk you a little bit because I'm like, okay, we need to meet. We have the obvious things in common. So let me see what she's about. So I click on your Facebook profile and my eyes just about bugged out of my head because you are from and live in, right? Live near.
Yeah, live near.
A place that is so tiny and small, and a place that I lived in from 5 to 7 years old called Waynesboro, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, right in the middle of nowhere. And it's one of those towns that no one's ever heard of. We're literally like 2-3 hours from the nearest city. And it was absolutely crazy. When you said that, I was like, oh my goodness, no way.
I couldn't believe it. I don't think Waynesboro has ever come up in a conversation in my life.
Yeah,
other
never.
than, talking about my history in a family kind of way, but I couldn't believe it. So we moved there from Texas. My dad was in the Air Force, and that's where we moved. And then from there, we went on, we lived there for 2 years. I think it was 2 years now that I'm thinking about it. Yeah. I think it was 1.5 years, 2 years. Anyway, that was super funny. And then as we will be diving into, you love Rocky and have used Rocky in your business. And Rocky is such a big deal for people who grew up in Pennsylvania. So I grew up in Lansdale, about 25 miles northwest of Philadelphia. And I remember so clearly in 1976 for the bicentennial celebrations going into Philadelphia. It was crazy crowds and everything. And I remember being like hanging out and doing chalk art right in front of the art museum. And also at some point that year, I purchased something that I showed you the first time I met you, the Rocky, official Rocky scrapbook, because 1970 was a really big deal. So this is like what was published after the first Rocky movie was put out. And it's funny, as I was prepping for our interview today, I opened this book and I looked at the, whatever was handwritten in the front. And what I see is the name and address of a cute guy that I met in Wildwood, New Jersey.
Oh my goodness. Oh, I love the nostalgia.
Hilarious. Anyway, we digress, but also in honor of our interview today, I wore my love statue necklace. So I just wanted to say that I value your time and I value our time together. And I can't wait to dive in. So I'm sorry I went off on a tangent, but it was just so funny. And there's so many fun things about us connecting on Facebook.
Absolutely. And I love this too. Yeah.
Super fun. Now, I know that from the intro that I started with, that everybody must be thinking, how the heck did you go from being chief officer for counterintelligence at the FBI to becoming a certified holistic health coach? I mean, another word I've never said on this podcast, counterintelligence at a couple of words at the FBI. So funny. So my first question for my interviews usually is, what was going on for you in your 40s, in your late 30s, when you were looking to make a change? And I have a feeling that the answer to that response is going to lead right into the answer of this other question about how you made this big shift. So tell us a little bit, tell us all the things, what was going on for you, and how did you end up doing what it is that you do today?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my goodness. And I'm so glad you asked this. And to answer the second part of that question, everything went down at the age of 39. So I'll just give you a minute I'll put this all together for you. And I actually like to go back to when I was about 10 years old. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, but I think it helps to put the glue together. Because when I was a little girl, one of my favorite hobbies and pastimes to do, I mean, I love to play Barbies. I love to climb trees. But one of my absolute favorite pastimes to do was to put jigsaw puzzles together. And we had this huge dining room table. My parents, you talked about Waynesboro. I grew up, my parents had a Sears and Roebuck kit home. So that's the house that I grew up in. And we had this huge dining room table. And I was not satisfied with one puzzle. To me, that was really boring. So I took like 2 and 3 different puzzles and I dumped them all out on the table at the same time. I would mix them up and then put them back together.
Oh, yes. That sounds like so much fun to me.
Total nerd alert. And, I'm sure you remember the movie, The Sixth Sense, and the little kid, and he's like, I see dead people. Well, I saw patterns, and I've been like that from tiny up. And it was a childhood dream to work for the FBI. And I ended up as I was doing some consulting for Booz Allen Hamilton, and I actually had a chance to join the ranks, way back when, right after 9/11. And this was actually after the 9/11 Commission Report and the WMD Commission Report came out. And if you recall, this was like right when the internet was new. Agencies weren't talking to each other. They had these old archaic databases. And so I had still have a project management background. I wasn't an agent. I was a project manager. And so they brought me in to help post 9/11 to look at the disparate pieces within the FBI and to figure out how we can put these disparate pieces together based on all the recommendations from Congress. So that was my job. It was so much fun. It was so much fun. And then I guess I did a good job because they basically opened up the billet in Congress for me to be the chief of staff for counterintelligence program management office. So I ran the entire office that did all of the the program management and the data analytics for the entire division. And it was such an honor. It was so much fun because, again, putting the puzzle pieces together, like this is a common theme.
Well, I also love that it was a dream of yours.
Yeah.
It was a dream of yours. I mean,
it was a childhood dream. Yeah.
I wanted to be a teacher. I didn't think about FBI and that kind of thing, but it's whenever somebody talks about a dream that they had and they've created the reality for themselves, it just brings me as a coach and as an interviewer so much pleasure. And it's so inspirational, let alone that you were a bit of a badass. It is so inspirational to hear this story. Okay, take it away.
Yeah. So in 2010, on my 39th birthday, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I ended up going through the traditional treatment, surgery, chemo, radiation. And then 1 year later, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune disease. And my health was supposed to start getting better, but it actually kept getting worse and worse and worse. And not just working at the FBI, but I had a background. I was a competitive athlete. I raced mountain bikes. I was in Xterra, which is a off-road triathlon. So, I thought that I was the epitome of health because I was a competitive athlete. I weighed 110 pounds. I'd stand on a podium and get a medal around my neck. And I thought that meant that I was in the best shape of my life and the best health ever. But things like, eating my probably 95% of my diet was sugar and processed foods, because I could get away with it, right? Because I was exercising all the time and quote unquote thought I was healthy. So, and we can get into that a little bit later, but
yeah, like I'm taking that in actually, because I'm just thinking, as older women, we know more about feeling terrible and the relationship with food. But as somebody so much younger, and you didn't put it together that, you weren't feeling great. You started to get sick. And then I would imagine it was a massive wake up call. Like how much bigger does a clue or a sign need to be?
Right.
It's
right.
huge. Wow.
And I ignored it for years, for probably the first 5 or 6 years. I just kind of said, well, this is how it's supposed to be. Like my body's just broken now, and I just didn't know any better. And
then I think broken from chemo. Did you think broken from? Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I just thought that, okay, well, I've been through a lot with cancer and chemo, and then I've got this autoimmune disease, and I was experiencing a lot of just really debilitating fatigue. And I was like, well, this is all just how it's supposed to be. And then I decided to take control of my health, and I became a health coach. I became a certified holistic health coach. And I went down the traditional path of all the things that you learn as a health coach. And really, originally it was just for my own improvement. And my thought was, I want to get 10% better. And my health was actually so bad that in 2017, I was forced to resign from my dream job at the FBI. I was barely able to get out of bed. I mean, when I say debilitating fatigue, it was really bad. And I, like I said, I suffered for a few years, and then I'm like, okay, I need to do something about this.
Okay. And, wow. So I just I'm fascinated by decision making.
Yeah.
And so when you started to think, like, where was that turning point in the way you were thinking of just la-di-da going along, believing that your body was broken to, I'm ready to make a change and I'm going to go the health coach route? Like, it's one thing to just consume information for yourself, right, but you weren't thinking that way. And you were still struggling with your dream job and trying to figure out how to manage that. So what was that piece like, the minutia?
Yeah. So I think what happened was, so I dived into becoming a health coach to improve my health. And again, I was thinking maybe 10%. Like if I do the things that, I learn, maybe I can get 10% better. And that's all that I was thinking at the point. I wasn't thinking optimal health. I wasn't thinking vibrant health. I wasn't thinking actually coaching. I just wanted to use what I learned to get better. And then I actually got worse. And when I was forced to resign, they basically took away all the other options. It was my choice. And, that was a rock bottom because, like I said, like that was my dream job and that was my entire identity. That was everything to me. And that was a level of just marinating in my own misery, not just from the fact of my health has hit rock bottom, but just like I felt like a failure. I was married at the time. I had a young stepson, and I felt like I was worthless. Like I felt like I could do nothing. And my entire value was wrapped up in being a successful career woman and being, a good wife and a good stepmother. And I realized one day it wasn't like it was just, some light and angels or anything. I just woke up and I'm like, you know what? I'm done. I'm done marinating in my misery, and we need to figure this out.
That's remarkable. I think that's remarkable, because to come from the depths of despair, things were really, really bad. And for you to take significant action like that, like serious action, that's something. Even making the decision of where to study, where to find somebody that you can trust, or a program, or a methodology, like whatever it is. I find that that's where I tend to stay confused if I can't make a decision, because I just don't have the literacy to understand what I'm getting into.
Yeah.
So that's remarkable. So you took this step, and then what happened? Why did you get worse?
Yeah. So, what had happened was, what I realized is that good health is not the absence of disease, and that disease is actually end state inflammation, meaning we have control over our everyday choices, what we eat, our lifestyle choices, the toxins we surround ourselves with, the toxic people we surround ourselves with, the toxic thoughts we surround ourselves with. And the more that accumulates in our body, it doesn't have anywhere to go. And that, like I said, the end state inflammation is disease. And this isn't something that happens overnight. It's years where it grows and develops. And what I realized is that all of the programs that I went through and everything that I learned, they focus on the doing, and they focus on the tactical things to do. And those tactical things to do are really important because they help to get results. But there was something that was missing. And that's when I was like, there's something, and back to let's find the clues, right? I like to say and that's what I do now as a health coach. I help the women find those clues, and we put those pieces of the puzzle together. And that's what I did. And that's when I realized there's a big piece of the doing that everyone talks about, but there's two missing pieces that not a lot of people talk about. And that's where I come in.
And so are your clients prepared for that kind of an answer? I would sense that they'd probably be a little frustrated that you can't just make things go faster.
Yeah. And I think just we as a society, we are programmed for the quick fix. We're programmed that, we pop something in the microwave and a minute later, we've got dinner. We put up an app on our phone and 10 minutes later, we've, got something at our door. And we've just been so programmed for that quick fix. But the thing to remember is that, and especially when it comes to our health, and the women I work with, we're looking at, weight gain and energy loss and restless sleep. I mean, those are the big three in midlife. And when you look at it from that perspective, it took us years to get to this place. So it's going to take a minute to unwind, to kind of undo some of those bad habits and rewiring and programming in our minds, and then start on the doing. So yeah, it can be frustrating, but I think when you have a proven process to take you from A to Z, right, that I think that is a lot better than just jumping from protocol to protocol to protocol. And, and especially, looking at like weight gain for an example. I can't tell you how many women, they're like, I do this like a full-time job. Like I gain weight, I lose it, I gain it back, I lose it, I gain it back. Right. So how is this sustainable? And that's really where my strength is from the stuff, everything that I overcame. But then now what I do to help women as a holistic health coach is really my forte is in that lane of let's make this sustainable. Let's make this the last time you ever have to worry about this.
Where did you start with yourself? What was what you probably perceived as low hanging fruit, or where you were going to lean in first?
Yeah. So do you want to get into the Rocky framework? Because I think this will help
Oh, sure.
kind of
I love
explain.
talking about Rocky. Any reason. It's time. Do it.
Yeah. So, well, I started with the doing, and then I realized that there's got to be something missing. And when I started to put the pieces back together, what I realized is that the very first missing component is what I call the R, and the Rocky framework is ROCKY. So R stands for rear view mirror. And that is when you got to go back and get right and make peace with your past. This is hard. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is tough. And this isn't just, going into the DeLorean and changing your past. This is showing up in a place of peace and forgiveness with the situation or situations, with the other people, but most importantly, with ourselves. Because typically that's where we come down the hardest, is the blame and the shame and all of the stuff that we put on ourselves. And the very first thing that we do is we clear this out. And here's why this is important. Albert Einstein said that everything that's created is created twice. So it's first created in our mind, and then it manifests physically. So when we're in the mode of the doing, right, we're doing from that place of we're still in some of these negative emotions and limiting beliefs and stories from our past. And you think about it, when we're growing up, so many of us, we're told we're the smart one, or we're the pretty one, or we're the good for nothing one. And we carry these stories with us. And these stories give us the validation. So we're constantly looking for that validation. We're looking to our career to validate how smart we are. We're looking to the scale to validate how pretty we are. Right? And then what happens is that when we're in our, let's say 20s and 30s, we go after the things that we were told was going to make us happy. So we go after, we chase after the career, we chase after the spouse, we chased after the 2.5 kids, we chase after the big house. And then by the time we're in our 40s and 50s, we're starting to collect these things. Maybe we have some of them, maybe we have all of them. And we have all these things. But now, because we're women, it's what we do. We give and we give and we give and we give to all of these things, because this is what we were told is going to make us happy. This is what we are told will give us validation.
But I think what happens too is that when we set ourselves up for the original plan, which started out as a dream, it started out as a strong desire that we bought into, sometimes willingly, sometimes subconsciously. But we've pretty much been on autopilot for a good 20 or 30 years. 100%. And we're not checking in with the plan. We're just doing the plan. And we're overachievers. So it's really easy to keep doing and to have success in the doing. But you're right. When sometimes it's a wake-up call, sometimes it's a milestone birthday, sometimes it is a scary diagnosis, whatever it is, it's jarring. And then we're starting to revisit. So with your wake-up call, it was so huge, like we mentioned, it was kind of hard to ignore. So with this first step, what was the thing that you set your sights on for yourself? What were you looking for?
Yeah. So for me, I went through a lot of introspection and a lot of that inner healing, and really going back and, working with, coaches and therapists, and, going back to those places and being in that place of forgiveness, being in that place where, I'm okay, learning that everything that happened to me was to create who I am today, and not to look at it from a place of blame or shame or woe is me or victim or any of that, but to look at that as these were the stepping stones to get me to where I am. And back to that Albert Einstein quote, when we're in that place of being disempowered and we've given all of that away, we've given our power away. So we have an empty cup, right? We've let our health go. Like we've put our kind of health to the wayside, gained a few extra pounds, not sleeping at night, all the things. And we're trying to create that future from that disempowering state. But when you can take a step back, exactly what I did in the very beginning is to have peace and forgiveness with your past. And when you can start that slate, when you can start to create future self from that place of forgiveness, from that place of empowerment, that's huge. That moves the needle.
Yeah, it really is. Because it makes perfect sense that the way you feel is what fuels your behavior. You don't even know how you're getting in your own way.
Yeah. Yeah.
For sure. Okay. And then, so what is the next step in the framework?
Yeah.
What's
so
the O?
The next step. So O is own your ship with a P, like a boat. So we'll keep it G-rated. And this is the one that's super unpopular, but this is really the one that starts to move the needle big time. And this is personal responsibility. And this was a wake up call for me when, again, going back and making peace with my past. And what I realized was that very first place of when I gave my power away with my health was that first appointment with my surgeon after the breast cancer diagnosis. And I'm going in, I'm like, almost, I don't want to say arrogant, but just kind of from that place of, well, I'm a competitive athlete. Like, how did this happen? Right? I thought I was the epitome of health. So it wasn't a woe is me. It was just I'm confused. How did this happen? And Susie, you want to know what the doctor told me?
What?
She said, lightning struck. And those two words were anchored into my soul. Because anytime I ever thought, well, how did this even happen? I just went back to, oh, well, lightning struck. It was just some random event. And I want to be careful with my words here because this is not about victim blaming or shaming. But I think our medical system is broken. And I think that we need to have challenging conversations. Probably not the first appointment, probably not when everyone's in shock after a big diagnosis. But at some point along the journey, we need to start having conversations about lifestyle factors, about nutrition factors, about things that we can control. And you look at, the big diseases, cancer, autoimmune heart disease, diabetes, even looking at Alzheimer's and dementia. And a lot of these can be minimized by our lifestyle and nutrition choices. And these are conversations that I think we need to go on inside of our medical system. But because of that, I did not take any responsibility. I continued to eat a 95% sugar-filled, junk-filled, processed food-filled lifestyle.
Even at this point with the cancer diagnosis.
I didn't know any better.
Wow.
I just assumed cancer just showed up on my doorstep, rang the doorbell, and was like, here I am. You suck. I continued my stress-filled life. I continued going 1,000,000 miles an hour, and I did not stop. I did not stop until the autoimmune disease, and my body forced me to stop. And that was a big wake-up call. And what I realized, disease doesn't just say, oh, you know what? I don't like Holly Bertone, so I'm going to make her life miserable.
Right.
I mean, but that's what we're led to believe. We blame our genetics. We blame our hormones. We blame just the randomness of life when probably 95% we have control over. Not to necessarily give it a foolproof, 100% this is never going to happen, but you can minimize the chances of the big diseases happening with your choices, with your daily choices. So that was the big wake up call for me, was when I was able to go back to that place and realize that responsibility is everything.
And where was that decision? Like when you were eating the bad stuff, you had the surgery. When did you start to really appreciate that your diet needed to be changed?
I think as I was going through the health coaching certification and really having my eyes open to how everything just connects within your body.
So sugar got a big spotlight.
Got a very big spotlight, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I look at the big three now. Dr. Casey Means, she just wrote Good Energy. She calls it the unholy trinity, is sugar, seed oils, and the wheat products that are sprayed with glyphosate. And those are the big three that we are consuming in mass quantities. And even just, minimizing, even if it isn't a whole elimination, even just minimizing those three will make huge progress towards improving your health.
Can you be specific about where you might find those three?
Pretty much in every food. Read the labels. Yeah. So, read the labels. A lot of food has a lot of added sugar in it. When you're looking at seed oils, you can look at things like canola oil, safflower oil, soybean oil, grapeseed oil, things like that. Any kind of oil, basically anything that's not coconut, olive oil, or avocado oil is probably a heavily processed oil. And then the crops sprayed with glyphosate. I'm not sure about the laws in Canada, but here in the US, we let it's rampant. And
how would you even know that?
It's in all of our foods.
So it's not that we're not going to read it on a label.
It's not going to be on a label. No.
Wow.
But the majority of, so you look at wheat products, you look at oat products, they are heavily sprayed with glyphosate. And basically what happens is that we want our plants to grow, but we don't want the weeds to grow. So we figured out a way in the 90s to create the genetically modified plants so that they're resistant to the Roundup and the glyphosate and the weed killers. So they will grow even when the weed killer is sprayed.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So you were reading and studying and embracing your direction, your new direction, and your eyes were popping out of your head, basically.
Absolutely. And this has also been a journey too. It wasn't like I went from 100% to 0%. This has been, a journey over the last, probably 6-7 years of, my own personal journey of trial and error of seeing what works, what doesn't work, and then working with my clients and students as well. And, and I think that's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned is that this is about individualized wellness. There's so many people that say that their diet, their protocol is the one best only way. And I've tried them all. Some have worked, some haven't, but I think that's also a big reason, why we're on this hamster wheel is that, and we'll get into some other stuff, but a big piece of it too is that we don't get it dialed in. You know what I mean? Like if it's not working and we're still trying to make it happen and it's not working, like we keep pushing thinking it's going to work.
Yeah, it's so interesting about it not being dialed in because what I've noticed in the last 10 years from 50 to 60 is just how disconnected I was from awareness of what was going on in my body physically, like really feeling and noticing what I was feeling, that I was feeling bad or that I was getting bloated or that I had a little bit of brain fog or like putting it together with food instead of just obliviously walking around going, maybe I don't feel 100% today and not connecting it to anything. Right. And so I've had I think it's a dairy insensitivity and not an allergy. I don't know. I haven't had it tested, but in the last 2 years or so, I've noticed that that's an extreme difference for me and I've started to make some changes. But I wonder how long did it take me to notice it? Yeah. I really wonder about that.
Yeah.
So this disconnection, which what I see with my clients is a lot of it is the autopilot thinking, but a lot of it too is our mantra and our belief and our comfort with being too busy. Too busy to what? What are we prioritizing more than slowing down and notice our thoughts and our feelings? Why do we think it's like a badge of courage or a badge of nobility to maintain this busy state. It's crazy.
I had one woman told me, she's like, well, I'll start to prioritize my health in 2030 when the last one's out of the house.
Right.
And I'm like, to me, that sounds like prison.
Wow.
To just be tethered to not feeling well and not doing anything about it and waiting another 6 years. And yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Okay. So owning your stuff, taking responsibility.
Yeah.
Nice. And what about the C?
Yeah, this is the perfect segue because C is create your future self. And this is when, and you can talk about like goal setting and habit stacking and all of that fun stuff. But really what I like to do is like think about, and you think about the piece of cake that gets passed around at the office party. You've got that monthly office birthday party. You got the piece of cake that's passed around, and typically you're like in your head, you're like, oh, I know I shouldn't do this. I know I shouldn't do this. I'm trying to be good, or maybe I'm going to have a salad, or, and you try to justify it, but you still take the cake and you still eat the cake and then you feel guilty. But then you look over, you're like, there's that girl that just kind of effortlessly just says, no, thank you. And doesn't think anything of it and goes about her business. And she's still having fun and a great time. Like how is it that I'm going through all this Olympic level gymnastics in my head? And then some other woman's over there like easy peasy, right? So this is where create your future self happens because what we want to do. So the first two phases, the R and the O, is about what I call the you-ing. This is going back and creating that level of responsibility and then going back and healing the past. So this is something that most programs don't have. They go right into the doing. So the C is all about the doing. And, you look at it from the perspective of, like you talked about things that are normal and being so disconnected that you don't realize it. And so many, we grew up in the 80s, 90s diet culture. So we grew up with, we have to count calories, calorie in, calorie out, and, count our calories and count our points and count our macros and count all the things and eat low fat and all of these things. And now all of a sudden, we're how many years later and we're getting a whole different, programming of this is not working, but we still believe it. But here's the thing is that what I see is we're, eating maybe an English muffin for breakfast instead of a bagel because, English muffin is a lot less calories than a bagel, or 2 eggs because protein, and then a big salad for lunch. And then usually like something like chicken for dinner because it's really lean, and then some broccoli, and then probably some rice because, rice is a staple. And this is how we've been programmed for the last, 20, 30, 40 years that this is supposed to be healthy. But in midlife, and especially now with all the research that's coming out, the game is changing. And if you're eating like that and you're starving 2 hours after you eat, a little bit hangry, feeling your energy dip, like, oh, feeling that dip and I need to go grab a snack. But, we're supposed to eat 6 meals a day because of metabolism, right? Or, feeling bloated, right? Like, oh my God, I'm 6 months pregnant, but I'm in menopause. Like if you're having all of these symptoms, but you think it's normal. And I'm here to tell you, this is not normal. I mean, it might be normal, but this is not the way that we should be living our lives. Like there is a way to eat healthy, nutritious food that fuels your body, that gives you that satiation. It's
a hard one. Satiation, I think.
Yeah.
I stumble on that one too.
That makes you feel full, but not bloated. That you can go from one meal to the next and not have any kind of energy crash. Your energy is consistent. Your blood sugar is consistent. Your mood is consistent. All of these things are consistent. Your belly's not sticking out like you're pregnant. I mean, there is a way to do this, but it's just getting it dialed in. One of the biggest things is more protein. But here's the thing is that, again, back to old school. When you Google, protein in midlife, the first 40 articles, I did this in experiment even just a few weeks ago, like what would come up? And the first 40 articles all said the same thing. And it was 0.8 grams per kilogram of weight of protein that you're supposed to eat.
I don't even know what that is.
It's specific to midlife. So this is looking at like 50 to 60 grams of protein a day. And when I talk about the example that I just gave, that's about 50, 60 grams of protein a day.
But what does that look like?
50, 60 grams of protein. So, so for an example, let's say a hamburger has about 20, 25 grams of protein. So to put it into perspective. So 2 pieces of meat a day, for example, and that's a minimum, right? So this is why we're still hungry, but the experts are saying this, and I'm talking like the top 40 articles, the Well and Goods and the WebMDs and the Harvard studies and, all of these experts, and it's not enough. But here's the thing too, right? Is that again, back to individualized wellness. So what is the right amount? The new studies that are coming out are saying 1 gram of protein per pound of your ideal weight. So, this is a lot of new studies coming out, and, a lot of the experts that I follow are saying this as well. And this level is giving you that satiation, that level of fullness, like not having the energy crash, right?
So the big message is women our age are not eating enough protein.
We're not eating enough protein. But here's the thing too, is that we're all different. So it's not just, eat more protein or tell me the exact number to eat. It's getting it dialed in, right? It's getting your protein, getting your fat, getting your carbohydrates, getting it dialed in to the right percentage that is right for you. And knowing how to do it so that as you change a year down the road, it might be different, right? So, so I think we need to also get away from that place of, and I don't want to say listening to the experts, because the experts are really good. There's a lot of really good experts out there. But I think to get to that place where we show up in a place of curiosity and we show up in a place where we are questioning, right? Not just what and why, but for myself. What does this mean for me? Like if someone were to tell me, oh, Holly, pineapples are the best foods out there. You're going to lose so much weight on pineapples and you're going to have so much energy and you need to eat pineapples in huge quantities. And I'm like, okay, got it. Well, if I were to follow that diet advice, I would end up in the hospital because pineapples give me an anaphylactic reaction.
Wow.
Right. Mm-hmm. So it's looking at this from a lens of curiosity, right? Creating that future self means who am I? Not what am I going to listen to and who am I going to listen to and what am I going to follow? But what does that look like for me?
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. This is something that is, I think, in terms of the work that I do, it's one of the most important things you can do. If you could only do one thing to transition and create the next chapter that is dreamy and more positive than where you're at now, and it's really in alignment with your values and priorities, it's to be more curious about why you're doing what you're doing and what you want and how it applies to you and your thinking and your feelings. It's like we've been so fascinated with other people and so supportive and so there for them. It's so awkward sometimes and uncomfortable to really give yourself the time to reflect on yourself. It feels indulgent. It feels selfish. It can feel that way because it does take time and it means it has to be a priority or you just won't remember to do it.
Yeah.
So easy to be distracted. I mean, so many women in my community, I say this all the time, we can't even read a book, an old school book where we can't do 10 things at the same time.
Yeah.
So to have it top of mind that you are important, you are worth it. This is your health. How do you feel? Why are you doing this? Why are you being resistant to eating what you want to be eating or, insert whatever it is?
Yeah.
Just the awareness that this is something that you can improve step by step.
100%. And the other thing too, and you kind of talk about that disconnection and you talk about this whole, it's more than self-care, but it feels like it's selfish. But here's what happens. And I like to think of it like a coin. Okay. And back to that, what I was talking about, you've got all these things that, society tells us are supposed to make us happy, the career and the spouse and the kids and the house and all these things, right? You've collected all the things. But what happens now, you're on the side of the coin where you are giving everything away to these things. And all of these things that said would make you happy are draining your energy, and you are resentful because they're draining your energy. And then you feel bad about yourself because you're feeling resentful because you're supposed to be happy. And we're in a really awkward place.
Yeah, it's a double negative. It's like
right.
the negative emotion that comes from the negative thing,
yeah.
and your thoughts about the negative thing, and then you're not showing up the way you thought you should be showing up. So then it's just more hate on yourself. Yeah, it's like a double whammy, to coin a 1980s game show.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, I love that game show.
Yeah.
But then you flip that coin. And you start taking care of yourself, and not from that place of fakey positive, self-care. Like, I'm talking really legitimately taking care of yourself, taking care of your health, prioritizing your health first. And when you can do it in a way that is in alignment with your lifestyle, when you can do it in a way that effortlessly fits into your lifestyle, all of a sudden that coin is flipped. And all of those things that originally said would make you happy, that now you're giving all of this away, and now you're resentful, and now everything is draining your energy. I mean, how many times at the end of the day, and you collapse on the couch, and your spouse or your kid is like, hey, can you, or the dog is staring at you like, I got to go out. And you're like, you didn't take the dog out like I asked you to, like, we don't have an off button. But when you can flip that coin and you prioritize yourself and your health first, all of these things that are draining your energy now go back to giving you energy. And you now go back to that place where you have that level of excitement and happiness for all of these things that are in your life. And even that level of just abundant gratitude for having all of these wonderful things in your life. And it's a totally different mindset to be able to flip that coin.
Okay, we're getting there. So now what is the K?
Yeah. So K is keep the vision, not the view. And here's what I see 100% of the time. 100%. There has never been anyone ever that has, that this has not been true, is that the obstacles are going to come up. I don't even want to say on a daily basis, but pretty much on a daily basis.
100%.
The obstacles are going to come up and go, nope, we're taking this away from you. And it's a rainy day. It's fight with your spouse. It's what do we have this morning? Like smoke detectors going off, right? So the obstacles are always going to happen. So when you can keep the vision, not the view. So the first two phases are what I call the U-ing, right? The R, the rear view mirror, and the O, own your ship. That's the U-ing. That C, the create your future self, right? That is the doing. K is kind of that in between the doing and the next U-ing. But this is where you basically change a relationship with stress and change a relationship with these obstacles because they're going to come.
They're definitely going to come. It's such
such
a mistake to think that things are going to be easy.
Yes.
We want certainty. We want to believe it, but it's not going to be easy, and it can still be amazing. Like, I'm always coaching about that. Like, it's just not realistic to think. Even this morning, my favorite thing in the summer is the birds. The birds in the backyard, the solar fountain in my bird bath, all of it. And I go out there we have a mulberry tree that's wreaking havoc and making mulberry soup in my bird bath. And so anyway, I go out there to change the water. And as I'm dumping the water, I slipped. I don't know what happened, but this big cement bird bath squished my finger. And I'm just like, oh my God, I'm doing my favorite thing. I love this part of the day. I'm going to set the birds up for success and enjoyment. And I got my finger completely squished. And I'm just like, it's okay. It's okay though, because that's life. I'm going to have the birds and I'm going to be okay. Yeah. But it's anything. It's little things. It's big things. It's a long weekend that rains the whole weekend, like the one we just had. It's anything. I know. It's so different when you expect it.
So a few weeks ago, I was giving a speech up at MIT, And so I was flying into Boston from Reagan National, and the plane was delayed for 3 hours. Now, it was one of those 3-hour delays that every 20 to 30 minutes, they're like, we're going to board in 20, 30 minutes. It's just going to be another, but this was every 30 minutes. And so I had a very tight schedule because I was actually giving 2 speeches at MIT, and then I had to jump on a 6:00 flight in the morning, so early, to come back home to give another speech locally. So I was on a really tight deadline. And so, I mean, anxiety is always a little, when you're traveling and speaking and everything, but there was this delay. Well, I just pulled up my laptop and I just worked. Like, I had no stress. I was like, you know what? They're either going to fix the plane or they're going to give us a new one. Right. I mean, they have to get us to Boston in some way, shape, or form. And I'm watching everyone in the first couple times, but then after like about an hour or so, people started to lose their spaghetti.
Mm-hmm.
They started yelling at the attendants, you don't understand. I've got somewhere important to go. I'm like, okay, we all have somewhere important to go. Otherwise we wouldn't be here,
Wow.
And not just that. Then they're running to Dunkin' Donuts, they're loading up on, donuts and bagels. They're going to the bar and drinking at like 9:00 in the morning. But here's what happens, right? This is what stress does. Stress will take over. We think of stress like one song on a Spotify playlist, but stress is a concert. And if you think of when you go to a concert, right? We were just talking about the Reagan years. This is what 80s cover band. When you go to a concert, it's loud. There's lights, there's music, there's dancing, maybe a little alcohol or whatever. When you get home, right, your ears are still ringing, right? You're still kind of dancing, like you've got the adrenaline, you've got the cortisol, you got the epinephrine, like it's all surging through your body. You get the worst night's sleep after that concert. And that's what stress does to us. It's not just one song, it's an entire concert. And this is about regulating your nervous system. And that keep the vision, not the view is understanding this is a whole new relationship with stress. This is regulating your nervous system so that when the obstacles happen, and they will, they're not going to derail your plans. It's not like, oh, I had a stressful day. I'm going to, the next thing you know, you're like scraping the bottom of the pint of ice cream with your spoon. I was that girl. I was that girl who, after a bad day, I would reward myself.
Mm. Yeah, stress and anxiety, this is something I learned really early on in coaching, that they really feel necessary. Like if you behave this way or allow the anxiety or freak out and lose your spaghetti, then things will get better. Like if you don't behave that way, you're almost egging on fate. Like it needs to be part of the scenario. You need to react this way. Yeah. And you really don't. There are lots of opportunities not to. And it's so interesting that you got yourself in that space where you're observing your fellow travelers losing it.
Yeah.
And it didn't help at all. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So what is the why?
Yeah. So R is rearview mirror. O is own your ship with a P. C is create your future self. K is keep the vision, not the view. And then Y is come back home to you. And we're talking old school, 80s movie montage. We're talking old school. What is it? The Wizard of Oz, right? It's always inside of you. It's been there all along. It's not a spoiler alert. Like we know this, but it's coming back home to you. And it's being in that place where your new lifestyle of healthy habits and nutritious eating and getting your movement every day, like this is an effortless part of your life. It is a part of who you are. And it's no longer something that you're fighting against. It's no longer something like, oh, I have to do this, or I need to do this, or I should do this. It is a part of you and you look forward to it. It lights you up. And again, back to that other side of that coin. And it not just lights you up, but it gives you that consistent energy throughout the day so that you can give to all of these pieces of your life that are important to you. And here's where I like to really challenge the women. It's not just stopping here. We could stop here. Totally cool. And I really like to take it one more step further and really challenge them to say, you know what? This is your chance to be the light. This is your chance to really help other women embrace their rocky lifestyle, to embrace their comeback story. whether that's at work, in your workplace, to embrace other people's, healthy habits. We should be able to go out to dinner with our friends and not have any judgment over what someone's eating, whether it's real or perceived.
So when you talk about Comeback Story, which is the name of your podcast, and it really is the whole philosophy of your approach, you're talking about coming back to you, coming
Yes.
back to health, coming back to ultimately the foundation of your future.
100%. It is coming back home to you and being in that place where you are in alignment with yourself, where you're even in alignment with your future self. And like I said, you're in that place where people are like, what's your secret? And that's when you get a chance to help others. That's where you get a chance to be a leader in your own home. I had one of my clients was, telling me, when she started the program, she was in a place where she was like begging her teenage daughter, and teenage daughters, like they've got a mind of their own, begging her teenage daughter to do this with her. She's like, I really think we should do this together. And the teenage daughter just kept blowing her off, blowing her off, blowing her off. About 8 weeks into the program, she's showing up in her own power. And her daughter, all of a sudden, with her friend, all of a sudden is like, can we join you? Can we do that workout with you? Can we help you make dinner? And this is where that shift happens. This is where you get to show up in your own personal power and you get to be a leader at home, a leader at work, a leader with your sister and your friends and all of these other people in your life, to show up and be in that space where like, I'm okay with myself and I have that power and I have that confidence, right? And you can do this too. And again, this is where people
I love thinking about
what is your secret? I love it. That's the best. That's the best. When people say that, you're like, oh, we're good.
Yeah, that is so good. So just specifically, I want to ask about this midsection thing that so many women deal with. There's definitely a shift that takes place post-menopause. Your body looks different. Your midsection in particular looks different. The little tricks that you've been doing for decades to lose a couple of pounds don't seem to work anymore. So if you could just give a little bit of advice for this specific problem, what would you say?
Yeah. So a couple of things. And again, this isn't a one size fits all. We talked about individualized wellness, but just from a kind of a holistic perspective is, number one, to minimize or even eliminate the unholy trinity, the sugar, the seed oils, and any kind of wheat or oats that are sprayed with glyphosate. Number two would be to introduce more protein. Don't do it all at once, right? Kidney's not going to like that, but introduce more protein to your diet. I always like to say a good goal is 30 grams in the morning for breakfast and start there. Another thing that we're doing is all of the cardio. And in midlife, we need to shift to more strength training, to lifting heavy weights. And I like to look at it from the perspective of, 2 to 3 days a week to do strength training, but also to shift our perspective of it's not about running for an hour or doing an hour of spin class. And if you love to do that, that's fine, but that's probably not going to move the needle when it comes to the belly fat. But what it is important is looking at how are we going to age? Let's look at cardiovascular. Let's look at bone health. Let's look at flexibility. Let's look at strength, right? We are going to live an average of 5 to 6 years longer than our male counterparts. So this is about aging with dignity. This is about living independently if you choose to do so, right? This is about, I want to be able to drive when I'm 80 years old, drive to the grocery store, get groceries, put them in the car, heavy kitty litter.
Well, you want to be able to get off the toilet.
Right. Get them out of the car, put them away. Yeah. Get it
right.
on and off the toilet. Yeah.
Right. We say mobility and we just think, well, what does that mean? Does it mean walking? Does it mean, it also means bending. Oh, it also means being able to go to the bathroom by yourself and get out. I heard a very scary story once where somebody got stuck in the toilet and had to call for help.
Oh my goodness.
Like the fire department.
Oh my goodness.
And image really sticks in my head. I'm like, wow, I definitely want to be able to get off the toilet.
I can't tell you how many women, I hate squats. I hate squats. Oh, my knees. Oh, my hips. Oh, I hate squats. Guess what? I hate squats too. But here's the thing. If you're 50 years old and you live to be, let's say like 80, 85, I did the math at one point. So you're going to be doing on an average over the next 30, 35 years, about 100,000 squats a day. if you go to the bathroom an average amount of times a day, but let's get real. Like, hello, pelvic floor. We go to the bathroom a little more these days. So we're looking at going to the bathroom on average 100,000 times over the course of our lifetime.
What a fun way to look at it.
So squats are important. What, you love them or hate them?
Yeah, exactly. I've told both of these stories that just came into my mind. I've shared them both on the podcast a million years ago, but sometimes I find myself in the most beautiful squat, and I'm very proud of myself. I'm like, oh, one time I was pulling weeds. I was listening to a podcast. I had my phone in my back pocket, and I was in a squat, and I was pulling weeds, those picky weeds that hurt your hands, and you got to wear gloves. And I was like, look at me. I'm in a beautiful squat. This is amazing. Sure enough, I pull the weed out, lose my balance, roll backwards into the street, and crush my iPhone.
Oops.
But it was a good looking squat. And another time I was in a beautiful squat. We were on a walk during COVID, and I really needed to go to the bathroom. We were in a big park, and I was in a beautiful squat. I was so proud of myself, relieving myself behind a tree going, look at me. I'm in the most beautiful squat at my age. And then sure enough, I finished and I looked down and my pants were not pulled out of the way.
Oops. Oops.
Which required another embarrassing situation to correct that problem. Anyway, I love being in a beautiful squat, and it does make me proud, but I love the perspective that you just gave about that. And those things, again, when some of us think about, oh my God, I have to make this change, it's going to be drastic and terrible. Right away, that's a mindset problem.
Yes.
Like, you're not curious about how it may not be drastic and terrible. You're not curious about what all the options are that you have and how you can start to make that change. So even checking with yourself about the way you're negative about certain types of change. I found that in my life. My mantra is, oh, that's hard. That's too hard. And I find I can do all kinds of hard things, and I do all kinds of hard things, but there are some issues, and they're usually around food prep to prepare for going out of town or a difficult conversation or eating in advance or bringing a snack, anything like that. Right away, my thought goes to, that's a little too hard. And then that one goes to, just this once. It won't really matter. So just checking to see what those thoughts are that aren't helping you live the way you want to live.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So, and I want to touch on two more things with last question.
Oh, good.
The other one is balance. Balance is really important. So any kind of balance exercises, standing on one leg, because that's the big thing, are falls, right? Falls, breaking hips, breaking bones, right? Not only do we want strong bones and muscles, but we want that balance. And then movement throughout the day is another big one. So, everyone talks about 10,000 steps. That's arbitrary. Research now is anything over 7,000 is where you want to be. But more importantly is that movement throughout the day. So even if you get a good workout in the morning, you're not sitting 8 hours at work and then commuting home and then sitting watching TV all night. Like, you are actually moving throughout the day.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Holly, because after COVID, so many people are at home.
Yes.
And are working from home and being home based and all of that. And sometimes I'm, just very aware of how easy it is to have a sedentary lifestyle when you're in this situation. And you don't have to be in this situation for it to creep up on you. But sometimes I just go up and down the stairs because I'm like, wow, I've been sitting for a while. I need to do something. But yeah, that's a really, really good point. And walking is always available, pretty much always available and free. So good. So Holly, how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you are a woman in midlife and you are looking to, increase your energy, lose some weight and have the best sleep ever and really look at your life from that holistic perspective, there's 3 different ways. So number 1 is my podcast. So while you're listening to this podcast, my podcast is called Your Midlife Comeback Story. So it's Your Midlife Comeback Story, and you can listen on Apple, Spotify, any of those podcasts. Second is I have a free gift for your listeners. So if you love the Rocky Framework, I have a free private podcast training series, like a mini series, and we go through the Rocky inspired framework in greater detail. And you can go to podcastholly.com. And I'm sure you'll have the links in the show notes too.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's podcastholly.com. And then come say hello on Instagram at holly.bertone. I play on Instagram. I love Instagram. And yeah, hit me up in the DMs and say hello.
Amazing. Holly, thank you so much. It's been so amazing to get to know you, but also your information today and your perspective, being holistic in your crazy story and all the stuff you've had to overcome personally, the way you integrated it all. It's very inspirational. And we really, really appreciate the time today on the Women in the Middle.
Oh, Susie, thanks so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Okay, that's it for this episode. Such a great interview. I loved Holly's use of the Rocky framework to help you get your head around what you can actually do to create your own comeback to midlife health. So good. Now, as you know, this podcast is all about how to love your life again after 50. It's really all about coaching you to be more intentional and to incorporate mindfulness into your life as a regular practice. This is how you put yourself on your agenda. My focus as your midlife coach is to help you get unstuck, clear, and focused on your current values and priorities so you don't have regrets. I can help you create the confidence, courage, and meaning you're looking for. If you're ready to explore what coaching together might look like for you, you're invited to book your momentum call at www.womeninthemiddleacademy.com, and we will chat. And finally, for show notes and links, head over to www.susierosenstein.com and click the podcast tab and look for episode 377. You'll also see links there for the new show, Women in the Middle Entrepreneurs. Thanks so much for listening. It's time for you to put yourself first, one thought at a time. I'm Susie Rosenstein, and I'll talk to you next week.